Let's see here. Good. So we're now, by the way, simulcasting on Facebook too. Good. Good evening, Mr. Robert Sidell. I welcome you to the Gateway Show on every Sunday night, 6 to 7 p.m. It's a great pleasure to be with you here tonight. It's also simulcast. We're on first of all, we're on the number one talk station in Las Vegas, and that goes out over the internet too. Just type in KXNT. But then simultaneously, you can listen on Facebook, wherever you might be, and you can listen both currently and later on. There's a recording on Facebook. And then the third way, by the way, this recording will also be posted on YouTube as the Gateway podcast. So you can catch these pearls of wisdom here tonight, multiple different places. So it's going to be a fun night tonight. I'm really thrilled to have Larry Broughton here with us. We've been interviewed on here, probably more than once actually, but at least one time for sure. And Larry's a very interesting person to me in all sorts of different ways. He's still believes in the traditional values of success, which, it's funny. They work. I mean, I don't care what anybody says. They work. They're not popular nowadays, but they work. It's and anybody says something different. The problem is they're usually looking for shortcuts that usually don't work very well. Yeah. And but so Larry has been. Well, I'm going to go back for a minute. I didn't just say, but weren't you in the Green Berets at one point?
I was, absolutely, for about 9 years.
So tell us a little bit about that. That's by itself. Well, listen, there's John Wayne, who wasn't a Green Beret, right? But he wore the hat, right? I'm just teasing. I love John Wayne too. I really did. But
yeah. That was an interesting movie. So he played. There was a movie. I don't even remember when it was made. It must have been the early '70s, maybe, called The Green Berets. John Wayne was in that. It was an amazing experience. I had no idea what I was getting into, Robert. My father knew. My father and I hadn't been talking for about a year and a half or 2 years prior to me enlisting in the military, and he had heard through the grapevine that I had signed up and was going to try out for Special Forces. And his old green beater pickup truck was out in front of my apartment one day when I was coming home from work, and he said, "Hey, I heard you enlisted in the Army, and that you're going to try to get into Special Forces. Do you have any idea what you're getting into?" And I lied and said, "Of course I do." But back then, they didn't have the internet, and so I had no idea. I really had no idea what I was getting into. But it was a life-changing, amazing experience, and it set the standard for just about everything I do now, Robert, in my life. I had been around some what I thought were high achievers. I had a wrestling coach who, was always asking us to strive for excellence, and I had spent a couple of years in martial arts at that point, and had received my black belt, and so I knew that. But all of a sudden, and these are kind of when I wrestled, like I said, and that's kind of, you're on the mat, and that's one guy against another. In martial arts, it's one person against another. But I'd never been on a team where all, in this case, 12 people were type A, hard chargers, high IQs, all striving for excellence, all pushing pushing the wheel the same direction at the same time with a shared agenda.
I just want to share with you, Tim Gillette, who just said to say hi to you.
Oh, good. Hello, Tim. He's a great guy too.
Yeah, that's what's fun about this. But anyway, so you're on this team, and it's really a life or death team, right?
Yeah, it's Special Forces A team. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So for those who don't know, the Green Berets is part of the Special Operations community, and one of the most elite units in the U.S. military. And it was just an amazing opportunity. I learned about the power of small teams who all believe in the same thing, and who are willing to pick up the slack for someone else. How often in business nowadays do you hear, "Oh, it's not my job," or let someone else do it? "Hey, I'm done with my work, boss. I'm out of here." that doesn't cut it in special forces. When you're done with your job, you go help someone else out to get done with their job. And as I said, this excellence is the standard. And then when I got out, Robert, and I had moved to San
And that
Francisco,
was 9 years, you said?
it was about 9 years.
That's a long time. Wow, you had a lot of good training there, didn't you?
I did. It was amazing, and traveled quite a bit, and it really made me open my eyes to just how good, how wonderful, how beautiful this experiment called America is. You know, and
That's
when
what.
you
By
when
the
you get
way, it
outside,
is an experiment,
yes, of course it
and
is.
it's an experiment that can be screwed up at any point too. So it's up to us too, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I wish more of us would consider it that way, you know, and that we've all got a hand in the success of it. It's easy to sit back and point fingers and say how everyone else is screwing up. But if we've got a responsibility, it's also our responsibility to get in there and fix it too. And just calling names is not a way to fix anything, you know. You got to
No,
put your foot in the wheel.
I don't know if it's the internet or what, but but there's always been some hostility in politics. If somebody doesn't know
Of
that, then
course.
they're a little bit delusional also. But I mean,
Yes.
it's funny. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were interesting people because when they were running for office, they hated each other,
Yeah.
and I mean, it was pretty desperate stuff between the two of them. But what's funny is later in life they became dear friends, and of course there was no phone or anything, but they would send letters back and forth. So you know all
Right.
about that too.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, I ended up going to college for political science. I thought that was the arena that I wanted to get into. That's how I happened to fall into the hotel industry.
Uh-huh.
Is that I've been on a couple of different deployments and thought I just told this story a couple of days ago. So, but I remember being on deployment in a country thinking, "Damn, if these idiots can run a country, I can run a country. How hard can it be?" Right? It's kind of classic entrepreneurial thinking. How hard can it be?
Right.
Um, so I after that happened the second time, I thought, well, maybe I need to get out, finish or go to school, go to university, get a degree, maybe work in the State Department, maybe run for political office. I didn't know. I just knew I loved public policy at the time. I loved international affairs at the time. So that was kind of the thing. But I do remember you're talking about how politics has been ugly, since the dawn of time. It is, and it has been. I remember being in the UK one time during one of Margaret Thatcher's elections, and I remember I forget it was at Trafalgar Square, someplace in London, and Margaret Thatcher was there, and she was doing this kind of meet and greet, and this old woman kind of walked up to her with a handful of
Oh,
daffodils, and when
oh.
she and all the press is taking pictures and stuff, and when the woman got right in front of Margaret Thatcher, she started hitting her over the head or hitting her with these daffodils. I thought, there's politics in action
I'm glad that it wasn't
there.
worse than that. I mean,
Exactly,
but
exactly.
nonetheless, yeah,
Particularly in light of what's happened a few weeks ago or a couple of weeks ago here in the U.S. But it can get ugly. But it happens when you care about what you believe in and you get passionate. Now, it can go too far, of course, and this is where discernment comes in, right? Um, but anyway, yeah, so I spent 9 years in special forces, loved it. Some of my very best friends I served with, the guy who was the best man in my wedding, was a former teammate of mine, and we're still very close after all these years. And we may go months without talking, but then when we talk again, it's an immediate connection.
correct. Yeah.
And I hope all of us have friends that are like that, where it's just lifelong bonds, Sadly, I
I'm,
do know a lot of people who just don't have those types of friends.
you know what? I am one of those lucky people. I really, really am. I have a group of friends
Good.
I've known since kindergarten, believe it or not. And we usually try to get together about once a year. We go up to the mountains and get together, usually,
Yeah.
unless illness or something else gets in the way of it.
Sure,
But
sure.
it's a little bit easy, and then to take these long-term friends for granted, but they are actually the big treasure of life, really.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think so because it's interesting when they have seen you at your worst, they've seen you at your smallest. Some of them have seen us at our darkest and they still love us, right?
That's what we really hope for in life, right? And we hope for that in a marriage too.
I
Um,
think so. Yeah. Yeah.
by the way, here's a little fun little story in my own life from today. Just we got a call on a serious case. In fact, I might talk about it a little bit later. Um, so I ended up. I was actually at home. My wife was over at my kid's house, and they couldn't get through to me because for whatever the reason may be.
Mm.
My wife
Yeah.
drove all the way home, said, "Hey, your son, who also works with me, wants you to get on the phone too." So she drove all the way home, which is about 5 miles, to
Yeah.
tell me he needs you on the phone.
Oh,
That's being on the same team, right?
yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So and then I'll come back. Well, maybe I should just talk about it for 1 second now. It's funny. I It's a funny thing happened today. I happened to go on Twitter, which occasionally I see you doing some talks and stuff, and other people too. But I saw this lady talking about it. I couldn't believe it. She goes, "It's another boring Sunday." And I thought, wow, my life is not boring. I mean,
Wow.
I don't know what her story was. I really don't. But that was kind of the end of my listening to her. But it's so funny. Within about 30 minutes, I got this call, and it turns out somebody had been in a very, very bad accident and literally already had one of their legs amputated.
Oh
And so,
gosh.
yeah, and so I decided to, of course, I'm a minister as well as a lawyer, so I offered to
Yeah.
pray with her, and he's not that old either. Well, he's just about 50 or something like that. And
Yeah.
but he may. So I'll just leave it that at that point about him. But so the end result was is we ended up going down to the hospital and meeting with him today. So
Well,
so it's you just don't know. I mean, when I first was there, he was intubated. He couldn't even talk, and he's in trauma intensive care. And but I'm thinking to myself, this is not boring for me.
yeah.
I'm in a different journey, and I guess I'd be grateful, right? I mean, grateful you have things that are interesting, and you can make a difference to people, and so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. I am not plagued with that boring
right.
Sunday
I'm not.
stuff.
I'm
Now,
not.
I don't know what, maybe she was just poking fun or whatever, but I feel like when you're a passive participant in your own life, I can see how it can be boring.
Right.
If you let life happen to you instead of you, getting out there and getting after it. I can't remember the last time I had a boring day. It's
Me either. That's not on.
I
That's not
get
on my.
after it.
That's not on
Yeah.
my agenda. And I,
Yeah.
I guess we're lucky. I mean, we don't really know as we get older. I mean, I don't really know, but at least right. I don't think it's probably my future. When my dad lived a very full life. I got. Oh,
Yes.
well, we're gonna go to a break. I just didn't realize. So, my friends, I'm interviewing Larry Broughton. By the way, and I want to talk more. We just got started talking about he was a Green Beret, but he's got a lot of other very exciting things. So stay tuned. We'll be back right after the break. And those of you on Facebook, stay, and we'll just keep going right through this break. Be back in a moment. This is Robert Sidell. Okay. Yeah, so it's funny. I never really know who's listening on the radio. Of course, this will be on the recording on Facebook, but
Sure.
but lately I've had more people telling me, yeah, they listen to me on the radio. It tends to be a little bit older group of people that are listening on the radio, and it's not always that way,
Yeah.
but it's there's a fairly loyal group of people that listen every week on the radio, and that's kind of
Yeah,
fun.
I would imagine, particularly on a Sunday evening there in Las Vegas, either they're driving or it's
Right.
just kind of out of habit. They're in their workplace and they've got the radio playing. But you've been doing this for a long time. I'm sure
I
you got
have
a
been.
lot of
I
loyal
have
fans.
been, and yeah, it's just kind of a thing I do. I mean,
Yeah.
it's given me a chance. It's good for me, by the way. It's very good for me to. I also do a lot of shows where I just focus on a positive theme. By the way, the title I gave for tonight was "Never, Never Give Up," because I thought that
Okay.
sounds like you.
We should talk about that.
We're going to talk about it, believe me. But I know. But in any event, yeah. So it's funny while we're talking. I hear my commercials and stuff going on in my headphones while we're
Yeah, I
talking.
understand.
But
I
you know what
understand.
that's like. But
Yeah.
in any event, no. You know what? So my dad. I started to say the funny thing about my dad. He carried a very active life all the way through his 80s, and when he was 92, he went to Antarctica. Can you believe that?
At 92.
Yeah, he went to Antarctica.
Love
Yeah,
it. I love it.
he went with my brother and my sister, and but he was still pretty very at 92. My dad was still strongly in the game. He's still
I think
driving.
you need, I think it's important for particularly men because we find so much of our purpose and meaning out of what we do professionally. And then when we retire, we oftentimes lose our
I
meaning.
know.
I've seen
Yeah,
so many men, they retire and they start dying.
that's a common story, right? And
Yeah.
I don't. My dad, he followed your philosophy, and he literally, well, he was very actively he's a doctor, very actively practicing till he was 85,
Mm.
and he actually practiced some until he was 90. I remember going to see him. He rented a room from another doctor, and literally was still seeing some patients all the way up till he was age 90. Isn't that amazing?
Right. I love it. I love
I
that's
think,
my
you know what
plan.
I think kept him going? He used to tell me this. He says, they come in and say, Dr. Sidell, please don't ever retire. Please don't retire. Well, that's good for us. We want to hear that, right?
Exactly.
It, I think that's what
Exactly.
kind of kept my dad going. I really do. And among
Yeah.
other things, um,
'Cause you're still making a contribution to the world, to society, to people's lives.
you,
It's important to know
right.
that.
Even my work, I mean, I'm 72 now, like I was saying. But what's interesting is that I talk to a lot now. A lot of clients are always calling, "Oh, it's so good to talk to you. We wouldn't go to anybody else." They're giving me a lot of positive feedback all the time, which is a very nice thing to hear.
Yes.
It
Yeah,
just
of
makes you
course.
feel, like you say, it makes you feel needed. Okay, we're going
Yeah.
to go back on 10 seconds.
Great. Thanks.
Good evening, this is Robert Sidell. It's a great pleasure being here this Sunday night on the Gateway Show on live every Sunday evening, 6 to 7 p.m. As Larry was saying, for many years I've been doing this. And I was telling him I do it not just for people who might be listening, but for me also, because I always get an important message. Uh, in fact, you know who I interviewed last week is Susie Pruden. You remember Susie, who does
I do,
the
yeah.
books and everything? She's 80 now. She'll be 81 shortly. So she's still in the game too, you know?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of life, Larry and I were talking about, my friends, those of you listening to our show, and that's what this show's about. I know some of you listening on the radio and other groups of people are also older people, and some are not older. But you know what? We have to keep reinventing our lives, don't we?
We
That's
do.
I think that's the game of being on Earth. You got to keep reinventing your life, finding a new purpose, and keep it. You got to stay excited about it somehow. I talked to, for me, I'm always thinking, what's a better way I can do my law practice? How can I run it better? And what can I give a better service? And luckily, our clients are very happy, and so we have very good ratings, and that's a good thing. But I can't rest on my laurels either, can I?
No.
So you
No,
are.
somebody's watching. Somebody's chasing you.
It's always, yeah, somebody's chasing me. Yeah, that's true. I don't like to think of it that way, but maybe it is that way in a way. I mean, on some level
Well,
it is.
I'm one of those entrepreneurs. There's a little bit of paranoia in everything I do. Like,
Well, it's probably true. I mean, that's all I can say. I mean, you know, I want to believe it's a belief system I like to adopt that the people that are supposed to come to me are going to come to me. But
yes.
I still got to do my job. If I don't do my job, I'm not going to have happy customers. I don't have right now. We have these excellent reviews, so people do research. They say, "Oh, we want you." Well, if I don't do my job, I don't have excellent reviews, do I? So we work as a family. My son works with me now. That's a change since probably the last time I interviewed with you, or interviewed you. And he's now 35, and now he has a child, and so it's that's a whole thing. And so we have a very family-based business. Plus, other people work with me too, not just my family. But
Sure.
so it's
Sure.
fun though. We try to make it so our clients sort of feel like they're part of a family experience, and it's just more rewarding that way. It's better for us, better for them. But I didn't want to. But I want to talk about you. So you are an interesting person. You started out as a Green Beret, and then you started to realize that you started getting into business world. Now um, I know you were very active in the hotel business, and I
Mhm.
know because this happened to every hotel business person when COVID came along. That was
Mm.
like the Holocaust, wasn't it? I mean, that's probably a bad analogy, but it was. But
Yeah,
it
but
was
I get your point.
right.
Yes, it literally decimated the hospitality industry, and by just about everyone's calculations, it was the worst hit industry in the U.S. You're there in Las Vegas, you witnessed this firsthand,
It was all
right?
closed here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Ghost town,
a
right?
ghost town. Yeah.
Yeah, and still to this day, roughly 20 to 25% of the hotels in about 5 markets, this is just as an example, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, what's the other market? I can't remember the other market, are still closed. 20 to 25% of the hotels are still closed and are not projected to ever reopen, right? Tens of thousands of restaurants across the country have closed and will never reopen. And these are mom and pop operators who, in many cases, were multi-generational restaurants, right? And I had somebody tell me on did a TV interview not so long ago, and I brought this up, and the host said something about You still sound very angry about that. I said, yes, I'm very angry about that. And they said, well, maybe just for your own health, you need to offer some forgiveness. And they go, well, like, maybe that's something I need to work on. But I don't like that. Listen, I love I love my country so much. I'm not a big fan of our government when they have that much power. Like, and they can just shut down wide swaths of the economy and then expect us just to suck it up and drive on, because livelihoods, families, and it's not just the business owners who are hurt during this. It's the team members, it's the employees who are hurt, the vendors who are providing, any kind of service or product to those businesses that were shut down. It was catastrophic. And so our hotel company was basically crushed. We're still around, but we've had to pivot. You were talking about pivoting earlier. We've had to pivot pretty dramatically. Now we're going to recover. We're going to come back bigger and stronger than ever because that's kind of who I am, what I am. It's what I do.
Because you're a
And
Green Beret.
well, yeah, that's part of it, right?
I know that's all. I'm just using it as a metaphor.
No, but that's absolutely right. I'm not going to let somebody put a thumb in my eye, and I'm not going to curl up in the fetal position for very long and say, "Oh, I'm done fighting." No, I'm going to come back bigger, better, stronger than before. And
I like that. Everybody listening, bigger, better, stronger.
yes,
You want to have that. If you want to be a thriver, not a survivor, you have to do that, don't you?
you do have to do that. Yes, yes. And I think that this is what I love about the entrepreneurial space, Robert. The folks that are willing to go into quote unquote battle with you, like in special forces, these are brothers and sisters that you have for life. I know like Tim Gillette, for instance, who's on here. He's one of the guys like you who are always willing to support other people, right? Just to help them. Not that you expect
Right,
anything out of it, but because you believe
right.
in them, right? And the entrepreneurial space is the closest place that I can find to that mimics the special operations community.
By the way,
These
I've got a
they're
question for you.
warriors.
I got a
Yeah,
question
sure.
for you on that.
Okay.
I've studied just no way am I an expert, but people that come back from Afghanistan, places like that, probably the same stories like you. Some of them have a very hard time adjusting because they were used to kind of an intensified. It seems
That's
to
right.
be their reality was intensified somehow, and so when they come back, it's like life loses something to them. Do you know what I'm talking about? You probably know
I know
100% better.
exactly what you're talking about. And I had one of those literally rooftop experiences on a six-story building in San Francisco where I was on the edge, literally on the edge, and thought, this is a bunch of BS, what I'm going through right now. I am used to working in this highly intense work environment with people where excellence is the standard in everything that we do. The Greeks call that arete. And now I'm working with a bunch of people who just phone in their performance and mediocrity is the standard. Please just be mediocre. And it drove me up the wall. And I
Uh-huh.
had no purpose. In my mind, I had no purpose. I hadn't found what am I supposed to be doing
Uh-huh.
now.
Uh-huh.
So there's that. But yes, there is the intense constant dopamine and adrenaline hits that you get all day long. And now you're in this heightened awareness constantly of you're driving down the road and somebody swerves in front of you. And is that, and you have flashbacks or whatever it is, and you wonder, is that friend or foe that's in front of me?
Even when you came back here, you had that effect, so somewhat.
I'm saying that's what happens to a lot of people.
Uh-huh. I
Yes.
see.
Um, and but I think a lot of it is just they miss community. I'll tell you, I wouldn't say a friend, but someone I was friendly with more than an acquaintance who took his own life on Monday night of this week.
Wow, that's horrible.
Okay. Yeah. And he's Marine and been out for a long time. And I've lost count of the number of veterans that have done that. And this guy had a couple of children and married, and it's a sad state of affairs when we lose our purpose and we feel like we are alone. I am not judging people who do this, but I've been there. I've had those types of ideations before, but it is a deep, dark spot to be in when
By
you're
the
going to
way, okay, so
go
how would
that
you, if
far.
somebody happened to find themselves, I've been in some dark places too, so I don't want to act like I'm up on this mountaintop.
Yeah,
But
sure.
but my question for you is, how do you what advice would you give to somebody so that they can keep surviving, as opposed to your friend or this guy that took his
Yeah,
own life?
yeah. Well, when you get to that point, I don't want to say that it's a bridge too far at that point, because I've been there where the only thing that kept me from taking that next step was a vision of my young daughter popped into my head, and I thought I can't do this to
Okay.
her, right? This was before my son was born, and I just couldn't do it to her, because I knew the damage it was going to do to my family. Um, but I would say this before it gets to that point, don't isolate. Isolation, what we call in the military, squirreling up. Do not be a squirrel. Don't go into your hole and not come out. Isolation is a
Yeah, that makes
killer for
sense. Yeah.
anyone, let alone someone who's had serious post-traumatic stress,
Uh-huh.
right? And for those folks who are friends of people, if you've not heard from a friend in a while, and your instinct says, I wonder what's going on with Robert these days. I've not heard from him in a while. That is God whispering in your ear, Robert needs to hear from you. Pick up the phone.
Huh. That's an
Go
interesting
kick
idea.
their door in if you have to. Pull them out, get the sun on their face, get into some form of therapy, get into some kind of group. There's all kinds of alternative medical modalities nowadays. Complementary alternative medicines is what they call it, that can help people. Sadly, the pharmaceutical industry that is tied in very well with the Veterans Administration loves to pump us all full of drugs, right?
Uh-huh.
There
Right.
are other complementary alternative medicines that can help people. But so I would do a little bit of research there. But I think it comes down to building human connections with people, And by the way, the sun will come up tomorrow. I think that's what we need to remind ourselves of. The sun's going to come up tomorrow. Now we don't know when, Christ will return, but odds are the sun's going to come up tomorrow, and
Um,
it's a new day
right.
to start over.
And you actually, we're gonna have to go to a break again, but I will keep talking to you about this during the break.
Mhm.
Those of you listening on the radio, I'm interviewing Larry Broughton, who's got a very rich set of experiences to draw from and teach us about leadership and all sorts of entrepreneurship and just life itself. So we'll be back in just a moment. This is Robert Sidell, The Gateway Show, and I'm also going to stay with you on Facebook too. So stay tuned on Facebook and stay tuned on the radio. I'll be back in a moment. So, by the way, one of my friends, Andy, who is listening on right now, um, he says, is the Green Beret as tough today as it was before? He put a question on there.
I think they're probably tougher.
Really? You think they're tougher, right? I'm glad to hear
Yeah,
that.
I do. Yeah. Yeah, there is a mass exodus though across the military right now of a lot of experienced warriors who are getting out. And I don't think any branch is meeting their requirement goals or their recruiting goals.
Right.
Um, so we're in a world of hurt there.
And
Uh,
I don't know
I
that I
think I know
want
why, but
to. I was gonna say, I think we both know why. I don't know that I want to make this show the conversation that
no,
is, but it's
no,
pretty
let's keep it
obvious why,
positive.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah,
um, yeah.
yeah. But yeah,
Let's.
the guys I know are tougher today than they were when I was in and before that.
Are some of them have been in a long time still too?
Yeah, they've been in for a long time. They've done a lot of deployments.
Uh huh.
Some of these guys done 8, 10, 12. I know a guy did 14 deployments. That's bad.
Wow.
That is bad and it is sad.
How old can you stay and be in something like the Green Berets? How long
You
can
can
you stay?
retire from there. You can go in and do 25 years in special forces. If I was going to go into the infantry or into be a cook or something like that, you'd move around a lot, but you could be in the special operations community for your entire enlistment.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Officers
Um,
get moved in and out, but the enlisted guys, the staff sergeants, sergeants first class, you know, those guys are in for can stay in a long time. As long as you're physically fit.
huh. So
Yeah.
that's interesting, huh? Well,
So you
yeah,
can be in
that's
your
going to be a
40s.
challenge for our country, is because we're depending on voluntary recruitment, and they've made it so for various reasons that people don't want to volunteer now. And secondly, people, or maybe firstly, people are leaving too.
Yeah. Well, why do you think they're talking about doing the draft again? What's
I
they've been
know.
talking about?
And since I have kids, believe me, I think about that. Um,
Yeah.
Luckily, it hasn't happened yet. But yeah, I mean, well, anyway. So we'll have to see. There's we live in this world. We're not. One of the biggest lessons I've learned, by the way, in my life, at the age I'm at now, since I've so much more wisdom than you, since I'm older than you. I'm just using may or may not be more wisdom, but is that I don't control. Nobody called me up and says, "What do you think about this policy, Robert?" And I said,
Yeah.
"Well, nobody so far that hasn't happened yet." And nobody called me. What do you think about the COVID policy? Uh,
Yeah.
you know, So I mean, I certainly expressed feelings to people I knew, but so that's one of the big part of the spiritual journey. You talk about Christ, but I mean, it's hard for me to face the reality that the reality is we only control so much in our sphere,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
occasionally you might get more power than that. But let's go back on the air just a second.
Yeah.
Here we go, back again. Good evening, this is Robert Sidell. It's a great pleasure to be with you here on this Sunday evening in July 28th, 2024. Great pleasure. It's right in the middle of summer still. And I actually love summer. Every season has its beauty. And I'm also interviewing Larry Broughton tonight, which he's got a lot of experience. Started out as a Green Beret, became a hotelier, had and still has a major hotel company, but they had also suffered some horrible losses during the COVID shutdowns, like a lot of businesses did. And then so he's had to face some adversities, but he's used some of the principles of his life to learn how to bounce back. So it's a real pleasure to have you here, Larry.
Thanks, Robert. It's always fun to talk to you.
I am going to ask you, and I wouldn't do this except I asked you ahead of time if it was okay. Um, I know you had probably, of all these different losses, the worst loss about 2 years ago now when you lost
Yeah.
your young son.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Was it
It's
two?
2.5 years now. It was January 7th, 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, and I remember seeing that, and as a result, I ended up going down into his memorial service. Which, by the way, I just said this to you, but I want to say it on the air too. It was a very, very touching experience to go to. I mean, he had such a loyal group of young friends. I mean, you talk about
Crazy.
friends. I mean, I thought
Crazy.
to myself, I don't, but he was obviously an unusual person because he
Yes.
touched a lot of people.
Yes.
And so you know what? Well, anyway, so I mean, so I was there. So from the outside saw this. Of course, I saw you at the time. So just how are you doing with that? Because that's obviously a big thing still in life.
Wow, you're sweet and kind for asking. It's a battle every day. The battle gets a little bit, tilts my way most days. I feel like I'm winning the battle. What I've realized is that grief is one of those things I'm always going to live with. This is always going to be there, and I'm okay with that. I am. I know that I'm never going to get over it.
Huh, interesting.
Um, it's just a fact. I'm not going to get over it, but I can move on. Not, no, no, no. I can't even move on. I can't move on, but I can move forward. Yes, I can move forward. I think that's where I've come to. And in the beginning, I'll tell you, Rob, I'll be a little bit vulnerable here with you, and we're friends. It's just you and I talking here.
That's what just
Uh,
us.
no, I felt in the beginning I need to put on the strong face.
Which is
You know,
natural,
I
right?
couldn't
That's
I couldn't
natural.
let anyone see what was really going on. But when I would come home, because I was with a lot of the stuff that we were doing with family members, we were doing over at my former spouse's home, um, and we live about a mile apart. And so it was interesting. I would come home back to my house, and I would just scream at God and yell and
Yeah.
sob, and it was physically painful. I mean, I could like my body. It felt like I had demons inside of me clawing to get out. That's what
Wow.
it felt like for me. But I didn't let people see that for a long time. And I started writing about it. And I'm working on a couple of different books on grief because as I've spoken to people about the grief and grieving process, we realized that these 5 stages of grief that we
Right.
oftentimes
Right.
refer to, I decided to look into it and do some research on it. And I was thinking, like, what is wrong with me that I'm not going through these five
Right. Right.
simple stages of grief?
Uh huh.
When I realized that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who developed the change
Right.
curve
Right.
that a lot of us talk about. She also developed this. She's a clinical psychologist. And I thought, well, she's too smart to get this so wrong. And then I realized after I did some research, she developed that for her terminally ill cancer patients to deal with their own death and dying.
Yeah, that's
And
an
people
interesting point.
got lazy and started applying these 5 stages of grief to everyone.
Oh,
So after I
interesting.
started talking to a bunch of friends of mine that were in the special ops community and other friends and people who've had family members or friends or spouses transition, I call it transition. I don't call it. This is me. I use my own words.
I like that word too,
I,
by the way. I use that all
I
the
don't
time too.
use the word loss. I know where he is. I didn't lose him. I know exactly what what's going on. Not exactly, but anyway, that the way I describe it, and the working title of the book is ambushed. That's what grief is. It's like an ambush. You never know when you're going to get hit with grief. It's not this pretty 5 stages for most people, anyway. And as I wrote and journaled and researched, I realized that I was grieving so deeply because I loved so deeply.
Right.
You don't grieve people that you don't love.
Yeah, it's true. I'm
And so if
sure.
I feel like if I stop grieving, I stop loving in some ways. It's not like what I don't, I just don't push it down anymore. Like if I'm in a meeting and I feel a twinge coming on, yeah, I suck it up for a little bit, but then afterwards, I let it come, I let it wash over me
Right.
for a little. And I
Right.
say a prayer, but I don't stuff it. What I've realized years ago is when I stuff my emotions, I stuff my feelings, it's going to come out. It's going to manifest
Right.
somehow, and usually it's not in a good
Not in a
way.
good way. Right.
Right. But you're right. My son was an amazing human being. A lot of people who knew him described him as, a lot of us have heard this, he's an old soul. Right.
Hmm.
And it did make
Well, actually, by the way, I
me,
got to interrupt you for 1 second.
yeah,
I mean, maybe it's because he's an old soul. I said, I did my thing. I'm ready to go. But I'm not saying it really is quite that simple, but you never know.
no, but I've had a lot of people who are close to the situation. They just described it exactly that
Really?
way. Yeah. I had one person who's I trust deeply who said two things that, and believe, anyway, I don't need to verify it, but she said he'd had other opportunities for off ramps, and this was the off ramp that he chose. Right.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And by the way, I'm not saying that it was not suicide. I know that. So people, I don't need to get emails from people because I was getting those early on. But you were at that celebration of life ceremony, and you
Right.
saw those 16
Right.
friends get up
Yeah.
there, and there were more who wanted. And this was his tribe, this was his posse,
Right.
right?
Right.
But I felt, and I know a lot of his friends felt, that they could breathe easier in life because Ben lived.
Uh-huh. I get
Because
it.
of his time on Earth, he helped a lot of other people. You may remember some of the stories of
I
kids who
do.
said, "Hey, he was the first kid who got up and invited me into the friend group. He's the one who taught me how to shake hands. He's the one who knocked on the door in the middle of the night when I was having a hard time." You know?
I know. I know. I said this to you way back then. I still say it today. After going to that memorial service, I had
Uh-huh.
even I had not met him before, but I had a genuine sense of sadness. I never got a chance to meet him. So
Yeah.
anyway, but
Yeah.
you know, um, I'll tell you in my all my spiritual work I've been doing. And I'm a pretty good student actually. That's why I
Yeah.
did well in law school. So I've been an avid, actually even obsessive spiritual student since my
Yeah.
20s.
Yeah.
And the only thing I've ever heard that you could do with something like grief is you they call you include it. You're not gonna get rid of it.
That's right.
You include it, but some of the great souls would say, but you climb on it to become a better person.
I like that, Robert. And as I'm writing this book, you and I should talk again. I'd love to interview you about that.
All
And
right.
anyone else who would like to share their stories, I'd love to hear from you about it. But I'd like to get different people's perspective on this. And the interesting thing, Robert, so my son was 17. It was about 6 weeks before his 18th birthday when this happened. And many of his friends had never had to deal with the death of someone. Like many of his friends' parents were considerably younger than me. I had children late in life. And so they hadn't had the death of grandparents yet or death of a parent.
Right.
A couple of people might have had the death of a sibling, but most did not. And
Right.
so many of them still stay close to me because they were oftentimes at my house and I hear from them from time to time. And so one of the second book well, there's 3 books I'm working on right now, but the second book on grief and grieving that I'm writing is for teenagers and young adults who have never had to deal with it before, that this is their first time dealing with
Uh-huh.
grief.
Uh-huh.
And I hadn't found another book out there like this. So that one's also in process right now.
Well, you know what? That's will be your tool. That's one way you'll turn it into a blessing
Of
by
course,
using it as a
yes.
way to help other people. And also, I mean, it's not a price you want to pay. Trust me, we both know that. That's a given, right? But it will turn you into a greater soul. Well, it's old
Well,
story. You're either going to get bitter or better, and you're probably getting a little
right.
bit of. You'll get a little bit of both, right? And that's okay.
During the process, for sure. Yes.
But I
Yes.
mean, I would say even now, not that it's hard for me to draw a comparison, but you're probably a level more enlightened than you were 3 years ago.
I would like to think so. Yeah. And a lot of people have said that they can feel the shift in energy when they're with me, for sure. Um, and it just reminds me about me being able to find it in myself to still try to turn something good into this. And there's other things we've done. I've set up a foundation and other things in his name. But I'm a big believer, and this is one of the things I taught to both my children and Ben. Bullet is what I call them. Is to serve first. If you just serve other people, serve your community,
Hmm.
serve your team members, serve your family, serve in your place of worship, that's where significance comes from. To live a life of significance.
Are you
When you
talking
live a
about
life of
as a way
significance,
to? Are you
success
also
is the
saying?
byproduct.
Are you saying partly as a way to deal with grief too? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Uh huh.
Yes. Yeah. When you
I
don't
think
know what
that.
else to do, serve someone else. And me writing, trying to help other people navigate this later on, that it helps me. It's a little bit selfish that I get to actually write things down and help other people process their
Oh,
grief.
yeah, but it's still a good form of selfishness. You know, um, the one book I read gave me an idea for how to
Hmm.
deal with all emotions, not just grief. But and it's a simple word. I don't know if it'll mean too much or not, but it's to recognize your emotions are innocent. So it's innocent to feel that grief. It's innocent that you're not getting over it completely. It's innocent. It's normal. And see, but
Yeah.
part of it is we have a war with our emotional self. And we think we can win this battle with concepts. We really can't. You can't win the emotional self with concepts. Emotions need to have some way to express. And
Agreed.
and one part, one, two, but we spend a lot of time trying to suppress our minds. And then we can turn into convoluted, we could turn into sort of strange beings, right? If we're too
Yeah.
compressed.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what you're saying to me sounds like a very, very healthy thing. And writing about it is phenomenal. By the
Yeah.
way, do you remember? We got to go to a break. So, do you remember Zig Ziglar?
Of course. Yes.
He lost his daughter to lung cancer, I think it was something
Yeah.
like that. And he wrote a book all about grief. You might like it.
I'll have to
It's
look that up. I didn't know that.
yeah, it was his way of dealing with his daughter's loss.
Hmm.
You know, and he's very, very honest about it, all the different stages. And not you're right, not just one simple stage. He's very
Yeah.
same kind of thing.
Interesting.
Okay, well, hold on. We're going to go to a break now. Folks, those of you on the radio, we'll be back in just a moment with Janet and Ernie also. I'm interviewing Larry Broughton. This is Robert Sidell, the Gateway Show. I'll be back in just a moment. Yeah, now the Buddhists and Hindus, especially the Buddhists, sometimes have developed certain tools just to help deal with some of these emotions. You know what I'm
Sure.
saying? And none of them resolve it. That's what I was saying. The one concept I heard is you can't. There are a lot of things you just can't get rid of. So all you can really do is include it as part of the fabric of who you are
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
make you into a better person. I mean, what else
I
can you
hope.
do? I mean, that's really all you can do.
Yeah.
That's the only constructive thing you can do, right?
Yeah. And by the way, this is always on my computer. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, that's fun. I told you, I have one of those. I have one of them.
Yeah, that's why I was sharing it with
Yeah, I
you.
know. It's fun. Um,
Yeah.
this is Reverend Janet, by the way. Uh, she and
Hello,
I have
Reverend
known
Janet.
each other for about 40 years.
Hello?
If you ever decide to get married again, she could marry you. She does a lot of weddings here in Las Vegas.
All right. Awesome. Great.
And
If I
here's Reverend Ernie. Ernie's kind of a fascinating guy. He was sponsored to come over here by a church when he was 18 years old. His family was. He's from India.
Wow.
And I think you were saying once to me, Ernie, that probably you would have never been here if it wasn't for that. Something like that, right? I don't know if can you hear me, Ernie?
Yes,
Uh-oh.
yes, Robert, I can hear you.
Oh, good. I just want to make it heard. But anyway, so Ernie's got. In fact, he just went to. Well, you went to India. How long? It was a year ago or something. When did you go to India?
Oh, it was just 7 months ago. You're right.
Oh, 7 months
What?
ago.
Yeah, yeah, back in November.
Uh
Yeah.
huh. It's that's a whole nother world. That's for sure.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, Larry, one thing that Ernie told me, where he grew up, I don't know if it's still this way. You told me about half the population. If you have a roof over your head and regular meals, you're in the top half of the population, right? Didn't you say that?
That's right. That's correct.
And there's a
Yeah.
lot of people. So the bottom half doesn't have that certainty. Is that what you're saying?
They kind of make do with things. Yes, make do whatever they can, but it's not permanent or it's not stabilized. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And but like I say, but Janet on the other, well, Ernie does weddings some too, although he's mostly doing teaching, school teaching, right? At this point.
That's right. Substitute school teaching. Correct. High schools.
And Ernie is also aging well. You're going to be 78 soon, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm 78. Yes.
But are you going to be 78 in August, or are you a 78 already?
I'll be 79 in August 15th.
August 31st, my
Oh,
birthday.
Oh, okay. And you'll be 50. What did you say again? Oh, you don't have to say. We won't say it on there. It's
I'll be 52. No, I'll be
52.
60. No, I'll be
Oh, that's
62.
right, 62. I don't know why. Did want to say
Yeah.
50 for a second.
You and I are 10 years apart, Robert.
Right. I can remember that. I can remember that. What year was you born in 62?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was born in 52. That's right. We'll be on in just a second. I'll come to you in a second, Janet. Okay, hold on. Good evening, my friends. It's Robert Sidell. It's the Gateway Show on every Sunday night, 6 to 7 p.m. live. And we have a lot of fun here, really. I mean, it's a lot of learning and opportunities for growth for all of us. And I've been interviewing Larry Broughton tonight about some of his different steps of life and how he keeps thriving and succeeding and reaching for new dreams. And that's why I entitled the topic of the show tonight, Never, Never, Never Give Up. You know, Winston Churchill's famous quote, right? And by the way, there's another quote he gave. You've probably heard this. I'm almost positive. He says, do you know, also start the first part. You can say that if you're going through hell, do you know what the rest of it is?
Keep moving or something like
Right.
that.
By all means, keep moving. He was a very
Yeah.
interesting guy. Churchill, the more I just studied about him, he really had extraordinary drive. I mean, he
Well,
came to the United States in the 30s, 1930s, and a mistake that one can easily make. He was used to cars coming from the opposite direction because he was from England. He stepped out in front of an oncoming cab and he broke
yeah.
something like 52 bones in his body or something.
Yeah.
It took him a number of years to recover from that, and yet he
Yeah.
still went on to become the prime minister after that.
Yeah, he is a fascinating study for sure. I feel like in some ways we're kindred spirits. I'm dyslexic, and when I first was diagnosed as a dyslexic when I went into the military, they gave me a list of a bunch of famous dyslexics because there was one more thing in my head. Okay, I'm broken in that area too, you know? And so on that list was Churchill and
I don't think
Einstein.
I never knew Churchill was dyslexic.
Yeah,
Dyslexic.
yeah, yeah.
Very
So the
interesting.
thing about his never, never, never quit quote,
Right.
I think a lot of people misuse that, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I
Tell me.
think
I want to hear this.
if
Yeah.
we don't, well, if we don't have discernment and we don't have people in our lives like mentors, and allies who are looking out for us, we can drive our life and our family right off a cliff, right? Now, I'm not one of these people who say when the going gets tough, give up. That's quitting.
Right.
Okay. I think that's what he was talking about. Listen, my friends, my fellow Londoners, my fellow English people, it is going to be ugly. They will bomb us. It will be a terrible, ugly sight. We must not quit. We have more fight to give. That's what he was talking about.
Exactly. I would agree with that.
But there are a lot of people who take that, and I've just seen too many businesses like, no, you are making the wrong decision. The next thing you know, bankruptcy, divorce, everything else, because they wouldn't listen to wise counsel.
Well,
Okay.
that's a good
So
point.
my thing is this. You must have enough discernment to say enough is enough. There's a difference between never, never quit and saying enough is enough. Okay. If we've exhausted all possibilities, and we've given it everything we have, and we can truly say, hey, I fought through, I didn't quit when the going got tough, then it's time to say enough is enough.
By the way, isn't there?
There's a subtlety in there somewhere.
Um, it's totally subtle. That, by the way, that's the prayer. It's the tranquility prayer in not isn't Alcoholics Anonymous, but just in general. What is it?
Right.
Grant me the wisdom to know when to give up and when not to. I don't even know the whole prayer, but you know what it is. It's the same thing you're talking about.
Mhm.
It's probably the hardest thing in all of life, if you want to be honest about it.
Yeah.
That's why
Discernment.
that prayer
Yes.
is such a valuable prayer.
Agreed.
So I'm glad you said that, though. That's a good point. By the way, in my book, the first version of the book, I said, always learn how to overcome a no. The next version of the book I brought out, it said sometimes you need to obey a no. So
Yes.
both things are true, and it's discernment. All right.
Right.
So Reverend Ernie, they each share a prayer with us or motivational thoughts. So what do you want to share with us tonight, Reverend Ernie?
Or, all right. Thank you, Robert. The topic of the prayer is never, never give up. Lord, thank you for this blessed day. Guide us not to lose sight of heavenly realities while we apply ourselves diligently to the circumstances of our earthly lives. Enable us to hear your voice, follow your will, pursue your purpose, and trust our intuitive and instincts from within to seek answers. Lord, we know your love for us is always available and who hears our prayers and has a divine plan and purpose for us. We pray for others and for ourselves, for forgiveness of our mistakes and errors, and for healing. We pray that we are moved into your will every area of our lives so that our prayers reflect the will of your plan in us and the answers that we seek from within for all the challenges we experience, creating heaven on earth. And so it is. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Ernie. And by the way, Larry, I think it summarized kind of what you said in that prayer, didn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Because it does depend on God's plan for us ultimately.
Yeah,
And that's
that's right.
discernment. I don't know any other way around it.
Yeah.
Well, okay, Janet. By the way, Janet took care of my dad the last several years of his life,
Oh
and
gosh.
she's not a medical person, but a good friend of mine, and she made his life a lot happier. It's actually a true statement. Tell him his famous statement about a week before he died. He says something like, "Well, I don't know if I'm ready to go
Which
yet."
one?
Yeah, which one?
What?
Well, tell which have
I
both of them.
know
There's a
there
couple
were
different
a
ones.
few.
Yeah.
What about the when you had brought the bed in? Is that the one that when you and Ivory were working on his bed?
Right. Well, yeah. Tell us
Or
that
what
one.
the neighbor? Didn't he say something to a
Yeah.
neighbor
Tell him
too?
what
I
he
didn't.
said to the neighbor. Do you remember?
No, I didn't know. I wasn't
Oh.
taught.
Oh.
You were in the
A neighbor
conversation.
came in about 3 weeks before my dad died at age 99 and a half, Larry, and said, "Is there something I can do for you?" And he looked over. And he says, "Yeah, get that young woman to spend the night with me." And the funny part is,
Like your style.
he did ask you that many times, didn't he?
Yeah, and then he would say, "I won't ever tell Bob about it." And I said, "Yeah, there won't be anything to tell him. So yeah, we're good."
I know. So you can see why he and Janet got along well. She read him poetry and things like that. He definitely. I mean, it was really a nice thing. I think for you too, Jen. I think it was a gift in your life too, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it was a gift. It was a gift. Everything's a gift, right? Everything is a gift for
Yes.
some reason or another, right?
Right. So what do you want to share with us? I'm afraid we're going to run out of time
Well,
here.
first of all, let me tell you that I know the Serenity Prayer. First
Tell
of
me the
all, let me
Serenity Prayer, all right?
I
So
will. God grant me the serenity of God grant me the serenity of the things I cannot accept and the courage to or change and the courage to know. Now I don't know it. I said it a minute ago when guys were talking about it. Um, oh, God grant me the serenity to know the things that I can change, the courage to change. I think I'm still getting it wrong. I
hold on,
don't
Janet. Hold on
remember.
a
Accept the things I
second.
cannot.
Janet,
Accept the things I cannot change.
I've got it. I want stay with
And
us.
the wisdom to know the difference.
There you go.
We're going
That
to
I know. What?
finish the radio show, but we'll stay on Facebook a couple more minutes. So those
Sure.
are on radio. God bless you. Remember, miracles are real, and the best is yet to come. God bless all of you. Thank you, Larry Broughton, for those on the radio. We'll stay on the Facebook for a little bit longer. Anybody on the radio, you can listen to this show again on Facebook or on go to the Gateway Podcast, Sidell, and you can find it on YouTube. God bless. Have a great week. Okay. All right. I think we're off the air now. Hold on, I'll tell you 1 second. Let's see here. I'm just listening for a second. Okay, perfect. Okay. All right. Thanks, Mark. All right. So just first, yeah. So do that prayer one more time. See if you can get it right there. Come on, I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, put me on the spot. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
There you go.
Yeah.
There,
And I've thought about
finally.
it before, and I thought, that's the reason why that's such a popular prayer, because
Yeah.
it's almost all
Yeah.
of us occasionally are in that place, and we don't know. And by the way, my wife told me, is it Kenny Rogers? You got to know, what is something about you got to know when to fold? Do you remember that song?
Yeah, yeah.
No one to fold them.
Know when to, yeah. Know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
That's
Right?
a little bit less eloquent way of saying the same thing, right?
Yeah, it is.
It's kind of funny, but I think we all face some choices like that. The only area I'm not going to ever give up is my faith in God. That's the only thing I'm not giving up. Everything else in the physical world, whether I want to give it up or not, we don't get to control that, do we?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And that's the interesting thing the last couple of years why I am grateful. I'm thankful. I don't know where it came from, but I've leaned into that even more. I know traumas can sometimes pull you or push you closer to God, or it can drive you away. Right. And I've had times in my life where I've turned my back on God, and but somehow this time it pulled me deeper, and I've gone on.
By the way, I want to tell you, one of my friends is a counselor,
quest.
or she was for many years. She's at, you know what I'm talking about, Janet. But anyway, she lives up in the mountains of Arizona. But she used to tell me she would have people come to her, sometimes having lost a loved one, and she said there would be two different reactions people would have. She goes, one group of people, even if they had faith in God, would say, God betrayed me. That's it.
Yeah.
I don't believe in God. She said those people would not recover. They would get worse and worse. The other group of people might have had the same emotional pain, but somehow they kept saying, but I'm still not going to give up my faith in God. And somehow those people, she felt, got better. So,
Well, I agree. I've seen that personally with a lot of family and friends. As I had said, to me, when I would come home at night or whenever it was for that first year, when I wasn't out in public, I would come home and I would literally scream at God and curse at God. I was pissed. I was pissed. But here's the thing: I didn't give up my faith, and what I knew was that His shoulders were big enough.
well,
to handle.
you know how we know you didn't give up your faith? You were talking to God.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
That's, by the
So
way, that's Job's story in the Old Testament, right? He said a lot of things to God, like
yeah.
that. But he never gave up his faith in God.
Yeah.
But I think we're all looking for a simple answer for all these things. I'm not sure they exist, but we have to keep growing. I mean, you're smiling.
I'm not sure they exist either.
No,
I think that life's a bit of a puzzle. It's complex, it's dynamic, it's changing. But that's what makes it so darn interesting, right? As I kind of alluded to earlier, I think that those people that give up are oftentimes passive participants. They just let things happen. It's Marcus Aurelius talks about this a lot, and he's one of my favorites, right? A lot of people aren't big fans of the Stoics, but he was one of my heroes. It says that the art of life is more like wrestling than dancing.
that's a good story.
You are going to get an elbow in the chops once in a while. You're going to get a dislocated shoulder. It will be rough. It's not tiptoeing through the tulips, right? But the beauty comes from the pain.
Or how you handle it, right? And how you react to it.
Yeah.
And I'd say all of us on this screen have had some kind of pain or another in our lives,
Yes.
and we've had to somehow adjust to it. And it's just a matter if we could somehow. And listen, I don't claim it's mostly God's grace that lets you get through it. Actually, that's what I think anyway. I don't want to take any great pride in myself, but somehow God has helped me get through things that I didn't think I could get through, and where I thought, oh, my life's over, and it somehow wasn't. And so I think that, it's a journey. And yet, by the way, I want to say leave one thing before we end this recording. Both of my parents, which Janet, well, you did know my mother a little bit, Janet. I don't know if you knew how well you met her at a few seminars. My mom died a bit younger than my dad, about 10 years before my dad. But my mother and dad both believed being alive is a great gift. And I've always my dad called it the Great Adventure, and he belonged to a club called the Adventurers Club actually, and they would travel all sorts of exotic places, do all sorts of things. These guys, they'd go across the ocean in a kayak or something. They were all unusual people, and they all believe. My dad always believed this life is this great gift, and yet my dad lost. Well, including me, including I had also lost. He lost two of his kids. He lost my brother. One of my brothers died at age 48 from pancreatic cancer, and then he lived 2 years after he was diagnosed, which was a nice miracle for our family. He should have normally would have died in about 2 months. He lived 2 years, so for us, that was almost like an eternity. It was really a nice time. We had a lot of deep conversations with him, and then he left two young kids behind. And my other brother died at age 55. He was an attorney, and so I had to be the sort of a counselor to my dad, and help. How do you move forward in this, Dad? And luckily, to some extent or another, when you met him, he'd already had both of those losses, Janet. And he seemed to have moved through them pretty well, don't you think, at that point? Or maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, no, he had moments, you know. Yeah. We would just talk about it. Like Larry was saying, he had moments. Your dad had moments.
Yeah.
He would bring it up,
It's interesting. I've, for better or worse, have had parents die. I've had two brothers who have died. Friends. I've been, I think, a blessing. I've been with two different people, like holding them in my arms when they have passed. And military friends, nothing, and I mean nothing compared to or prepared me for the loss of a child, the transition of a child, the death of a child. And part of me hates myself for this, that I didn't have that compassion for my parents who lost two, when I say lost, what I'm talking about.
Right.
Two of the children had died. And I didn't know how bad they were hurting. Now I do.
Can I tell you one thing, Larry?
I do.
This is
Let me just finish just one thing.
Oh, no, finish
There's
it.
a support group out there called Compassionate Friends.
Oh, good.
If you are a parent who's listening to this, who's had a child die, transition, pass, whatever it is, terms you use, I would encourage you to look up the support group called Compassionate Friends. And it's for anyone, whether the child has died in utero or you are 80 years old and it's a 60-year-old child who has died. There are people that go to this, and the group that I go to from time to time, there are people that are in there whose children passed 35 years ago, 45 years ago, 3 months ago, and they're still pushing on. They still need the support. So I'm sorry, Robert, to interrupt you.
No. I know. I'm very glad you stated that. All I was really going to say is that the one lesson I have learned, I'm not 100% perfect at it. We're probably not even close to perfect, but still, I really work hard on it. I lots of times will look back and say, I was blind and naive at a certain point. And I can see that in myself. Okay, it's there.
Yes.
But I also realize if I can't forgive that and make that innocent, I'm going to perpetually seal myself into the past. I can't grow, right? So I have to be willing to face the areas where I was kind of stupid and ignorant and just say, I'm still okay, and let it go and surrender it to God. Because now, I know it's easier said. It's nice, but believe me, it keeps happening in my life because I'm still trying to grow, and so you suddenly realize, oh, like you say, I counseled my parents, and who knows? I think the way I counseled my dad, I think was very helpful to him. I really do, because he told me that. But it doesn't mean that I have any real window into what he was dealing with. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm totally with you on that 100%. But we got to be forgiving of ourselves too, right?
Well, one of my mantras for the last 4 years has been to offer grace, patience, and forgiveness freely and often. And that's not just to people around us, but to ourselves.
Let me write that down. I like that.
Offer grace, patience, and forgiveness. Offer grace, patience, and forgiveness freely and often. And I've chose those words, every one of those words, for a reason, right? I mean, there's a lot of people who offer conditional forgiveness, conditional grace.
Right.
There's a hook that's on it. But if you're going to offer it freely, there are no conditions on it. And the often part is we're going to screw up over and over again. We still have to continue to do it. And so I started sharing that with my team members, the people that are in my business, because all of a sudden we're trying to do as much heavy lifting with a smaller team, right? And we're going to make mistakes. We're going to screw up. But I've applied that to every area of my life.
I think that's I love that.
Yeah.
I just love it anyway. Grace, patience, forgiveness, freely and often.
That's right.
It's the only, by the way, just one little thought on this. Forgiveness, I've often thought, is probably one of the greatest inventions in humanity. In Jesus, actually, he's the one that really, what is the one trait that's unusual that he taught? Forgiveness. Yeah. And how many times did he say to forgive? Do you remember that off the top of your head? His disciples came to him and said, "Is 7 times enough?" Do you remember what his response was? His response was, "I don't want to put
7 times 700 or something."
Right. That's what it was. 70 times 7. The point is, there's no limit. And that's, you know what? Most other traditions do not have that teaching. Yeah. They do not have that teaching. They still have the eye for the eye approach. And so that if you look at around the world and all the different religions, you realize that's something very unusual that he brought to us. And how are you going to live in this life? How are you going to move forward if you can't forgive yourself periodically for things?
Yeah.
And if you can't, you're going to start to die inside, aren't you? I mean,
well, we've heard this saying, we're sometimes our own worst critics, we're our own worst enemies. We see this over and over again, but we can only go based on the information that we have at the time.
And so right. And your level of development and maturity. And I guarantee there's a lot of things I would do differently that there are, but I don't want to go back and do it that anyway, because it would screw up the rest of my life. So you just got to go forward, which is better, by the way. I'm convinced, in spite of all of our fun little movies, you can go back in time, still better that we can't do it. We'd screw everything up, I'm sure of it.
Yeah, for sure.
But anyway, Janet, Ernie, do you want to say anything further before I close up what we're doing right now?
No, just have a good week. Take care.
Janet and Ernie, by the way, are very dear friends, and we've known them for a long time. And they almost always, unless Janet's performing a wedding, which she sometimes gets on Sunday evenings. But Janet's done everything. I mean, you've done weddings in all sorts of locations, haven't you?
Yep, I have. I was at Red Rock this week.
Oh, really? Out where I live. Huh, interesting.
Yeah, where you live at 4:30. It was very hot.
Yeah, it's been hot.
The people, they were from Ohio. Trust me, it was hot because you're in the direct sun. It's
right.
Hard to escape. Yeah.
Well, listen, and Reverend Ernie, he does, like I said, he's very kind, and here he is, going to be 79, still walking into that classroom with those kids. Are they fifth graders?
That's right. In over 3 weeks, I'll be there.
How old are the kids again? What grade?
Oh, I'm in the high school.
Oh, they're high school.
High school age, all the way from 14 through 18.
Can you see Ernie handling high school kids? I don't even know how you do it, Ernie.
I know.
Somehow you give a great attitude.
I still have faith for our youth. After seeing my son and his friends, they were some quality kids. I know a lot of people get down on, some of these younger generations, but if the friends that my son had are any indication of our future, I've got a lot of hope.
You know what? They were very, very, very inspiring. And in their own way, I'm sure my life changed as a result of attending that service. So
it was an honor to see you there. Thank you.
Well, listen, Larry, thank you so much. This will be on YouTube also, and it will be on Facebook. And so it kind of trickles out that way, and people will hear it on other places, other times. So God bless you. And I hope that I'm trusting that you'll be having fantastic things happening in your future. And the best is yet in front of you in some ways you can't even imagine. And the same for you, Reverend Janet and Ernie, that keep expecting miracles, right? Every day.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes.
All right, my friends.
I do.
God bless you guys. Take care of yourselves.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, Larry. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Robert.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, Karen. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, Janet.